The first time I saw a gun pointed at me, I was sitting in my own car with my hands shaking on the wheel. The officer kept yelling "stolen vehicle" while my name rang out like a crime. Then I heard who reported it. My sister. That same night. A law firm emailed me about my grandfather's inheritance, and I understood the stop wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. The fluorescent lights of the medical billing office always hummed with a particular, headache-inducing frequency at 9 o'clock at night. It was a sound that seemed to burrow into the base of my skull, a constant reminder that while the rest of Lake Briar was settling into comfortable living rooms or meeting friends for late dinners, I was still here, arguing with insurance codes and reconciling denied claims for people I would never meet. I rubbed my eyes, smearing a bit of mascara onto my thumb, and finally clicked the shutdown icon on my screen. The computer whirred into silence. I was 34 years old, and this was the life I had rebuilt. Brick by painful brick. It was not glamorous. It was not the life my mother had wanted for me. And it certainly wasn't the life my sister, Gwendolyn, flaunted like a diamond tennis bracelet. But it was mine. It was quiet. It was solvent. I grabbed my purse, locked the glass front door of the office suite, and walked out into the cool, damp air of the parking lot. The lot was mostly empty. Save for the cleaning crew's van and my car. I stopped for a second and just looked at it under the yellow haze of the street lamp. It was a silver sedan, 5 years old, with a small scratch on the rear bumper from a grocery cart incident 2 winters ago. To anyone else, it was just a used vehicle, a piece of metal and rubber. To me, it was a fortress. It was the first thing I had bought entirely with my own money after the estrangement, without my father's cosign, without Gwendolyn's snide commentary about lease terms, without my mother's passive-aggressive suggestions about safety ratings. The title was in my purse, the registration was in the glove box, the insurance was paid through December. It was the physical manifestation of my independence. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and breathed in the scent of vanilla air freshener and old coffee. I turned the key. The engine caught with a reliable purr. I backed out, eager to get home to my small apartment, heat up some leftover lasagna, and maybe watch a documentary before passing out. Lake Briar was a town of wide avenues and manicured medians, a place where the police cars were always polished and the speed limits were strictly enforced to keep the property values high. I drove carefully, keeping the needle exactly on 35 miles per hour as I navigated the winding road that connected the commercial district to the residential hills. I was 2 miles from home when the world fractured. It started with a sudden, blinding flash in my rearview mirror. Blue and red lights exploded against the darkness, bouncing off the interior of my car, disorienting me. I frowned, checking my speedometer. I was not speeding. I had used my turn signal. My tags were current. I pulled over to the right shoulder, easing the car to a stop near a line of decorative birch trees. I lowered the window, reached for my purse to grab my license, and waited for the officer to walk up and tell me I had a taillight out. Then the second set of lights appeared. Another cruiser screeched to a halt in front of me, cutting off my exit, its nose angled aggressively toward my bumper. Then a third unit pulled up behind the first. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden, frantic rhythm that made my hands shake. This was not a traffic stop. This was a takedown. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker, harsh and metallic, stripping away the quiet suburban night. "Driver, put your hands out the window, now." I froze. The command did not make sense. I was Scarlett Bennett. I paid my taxes. I had a library card. I had never even had a speeding ticket in this county. "Driver, hands out the window. Do it now." The urgency in the voice snapped me into motion. I shoved my hands through the open window, spreading my fingers wide, feeling the cold night air bite at my skin. With your left hand, reach outside and open the door from the handle. Do not reach inside the vehicle. I did as I was told, my breath coming in short. Terrified gasps. The latch clicked. The door swung open. Exit the vehicle slowly. Keep your hands in the air. Face away from us. Walk backwards until I tell you to stop. I stepped out onto the asphalt. My legs felt like water. I raised my hands high above my head, turning my back to the blinding headlights. The silhouette of my own shadow stretched out long and distorted on the pavement in front of me. Stop. Go to your knees. Cross your ankles. I sank to the ground. The gravel on the shoulder of the road dug into my knees through my slacks. I crossed my ankles, my body trembling so violently I thought I might tip over. I heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots approaching, the sound of a holster unsnapping, the unmistakable rack of a shotgun slide. "Please," I whispered, though I knew they could not hear me. "Please, I think you have the wrong person." 2 officers were on me instantly. One grabbed my right wrist, wrenching it down behind my back with force that sent a spike of pain shooting up to my shoulder. The other grabbed my left. Cold steel cuffs bit into my skin, ratcheting tight, pinching the delicate flesh of my wrists. "Scarlett Bennett, you are being detained," a male voice said close to my ear. He smelled of coffee and adrenaline. "Detained for what?" I managed to choke out as they hauled me to my feet. "I did not do anything. This is my car." I was spun around, and for the first time, I saw the scene clearly. 3 patrol SUVs, 4 officers, all of them had weapons drawn, leveled at my chest. The barrels looked enormous, black voids threatening to swallow me whole. Traffic on the main road had not stopped, but it had slowed. Cars were crawling by, drivers craning their necks to see the criminal, the danger, the threat to their safe community. I saw the faces of strangers illuminated by the flashing lights. Curiosity, judgment, relief that it wasn't them. I was on display. I was the monster under the bed that Lake Briar police were bravely neutralizing. Humiliation, hot and acidic, washed over me, competing with the fear. "Is there anyone else in the vehicle?" The officer holding my arm barked. "No," I said. "It is just me. I'm coming home from work. My name is Scarlett Bennett. That is my car." "Clear the vehicle," he shouted to his partners. I watched, helpless, as they swarmed my sedan. They ripped the doors open. One officer leaned into the back seat, tossing my gym bag onto the road. Another popped the trunk, rifling through my emergency kit and my reusable grocery bags. They were violating my sanctuary, tearing apart the one thing I owned free and clear. The officer holding me walked me roughly toward the back of the first cruiser. He pushed my head down, a gesture I had only ever seen in movies, and shoved me into the hard plastic back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing me in a cage that smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. I sat there, sideways because of the cuffs. My shoulder pressed against the plexiglass divider. I could see the computer terminal in the front seat. I could hear the radio chatter. Unit 4 Alpha, vehicle clear, suspect in custody. Confirming VIN now, I leaned forward as much as I could, pressing my forehead against the divider. "Officer," I said, raising my voice, "please, check the registration. It is in my name." The officer in the driver's seat turned slightly. He was young, with a buzz cut and eyes that looked bored, as if dragging a woman out of her car at gunpoint was just a Tuesday. "Sit tight, ma'am," he said flatly. "We are running the VIN." "Why did you pull guns on me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I have a broken taillight?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, assessing the fear in my eyes. The vehicle was flagged. He said, "Flagged for what?" "Stolen vehicle. Armed and dangerous caution associated with the theft report." The world stopped spinning. It just froze. "Stolen?" I whispered. "That is impossible. I bought that car 5 years ago. I have the title." The radio crackled. "Dispatch to 4 Alpha. VIN confirms vehicle is the gray sedan reported earlier today. Owner matches suspect ID." The officer outside the car opened the rear door. The interior light flooded the back seat. He was older, a sergeant maybe, with a thick mustache and a face etched with lines of exhaustion. He held a clipboard. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "it is my car." I said, the words tumbling out in a rush, "I do not know what is happening, but I have the title, I have the keys, I have paid for it for 5 years. He looked down at the paper in his hand, then back at me. We have a report filed at 2 o'clock this afternoon stating that this vehicle was taken without permission from a residence in Crestmont Hills. Crestmont Hills? I shook my head. I have not been to Crestmont Hills in 6 months. I was at work. I can prove it. I can show you my time card. Who filed the report? The sergeant hesitated, his eyes scanning the document. Reporting party is listed as a family member. Gwendolyn Bennett. The name hit me harder than the pavement had. Gwendolyn, my sister. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry, painful sound. Gwendolyn? I repeated, the word feeling foreign and poisonous on my tongue. My sister reported my car stolen? She stated you took the vehicle without authorization and that she believed you were in possession of a firearm, the sergeant said, his tone shifting slightly. He was watching my reaction, gauging the genuine shock that was undoubtedly written all over my face. I do not own a gun. I said, my voice trembling with a different kind of intensity now. It was not fear anymore. It was a dawning, horrific comprehension. I have never owned a gun, and this car, it is in my name. Not hers, mine. The sergeant looked at the officer in the front seat. Verify the registration owner again. It is Scarlett Bennett, the young officer said from the front. Sole owner, no liens. And the reporting party? The sergeant asked. Gwendolyn Bennett, sister, claimed the suspect, Ms. Bennett, has a history of mental instability and theft. I closed my eyes. The cage of the police car suddenly felt very small. Gwendolyn had not just called the police. She had crafted a narrative. She had used the buzzwords that guarantee a high-threat response. Armed, dangerous, unstable. She wanted me on my knees in the dirt. She wanted guns in my face. Officer, I said, opening my eyes and looking the sergeant dead in the face. My sister and I are estranged. I was at work all day. This car belongs to me. She is lying. She is doing this to hurt me. The sergeant stared at me for a long moment. He looked at the paperwork, then back at the stolen car that was registered to the woman sitting in handcuffs. The adrenaline of the stop was fading, replaced by the tedious reality of a domestic dispute that had spilled onto his highway. Uncuff her, the sergeant said. Sighing, the young officer got out and opened the other door. He unlocked the cuffs. I rubbed my wrists, the skin red and angry where the metal had bitten in. We are going to release you, Ms. Bennett, the sergeant said. It appears there is a dispute regarding the ownership or permission to use the vehicle. But since you are the registered owner, we cannot hold you for stealing your own property without more evidence than a phone call. But, I asked, hearing the unspoken qualifier in his tone, but the report stands, he said. We have to file an incident report on the stop. Your name is now flagged in the system as associated with a theft complaint and a weapons caution. It will show up if you are pulled over again until this is resolved. You mean, I swallowed hard. You mean every time a cop runs my plate, they are going to think I am armed and dangerous? Until you get it cleared with the detective assigned to the case. Yes, the sergeant handed me a slip of paper with a case number on it. You need to sort this out with your sister. We do not like being used as pawns in family squabbles. Ms. Bennett. I stood by the side of the road as the officers holstered their weapons, returned to their SUVs, and turned off the blinding strobe lights. They drove away, leaving me standing alone in the dark. My car door open, my gym bag lying in the dirt where they had tossed it. I was free. Technically, but I wasn't. I gathered my things, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat there, breathing, trying to lower my heart rate, trying to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. Gwendolyn. I grabbed my phone from the center console. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, her voicemail greeting picked up. Smooth, cheerful, perfect. You've reached Gwendolyn. Leave a message. I did not leave a message. I hung up, my thumb hovering over the red button. A second later, a notification chimed, a text message. It was from a private number. I opened it. Stop digging. You'll lose more than your pride." I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the tears that were finally starting to spill down my cheeks. Stop digging. I hadn't been digging. I had been going to work. I had been living my quiet, small life. I had been minding my own business. What did she think I was digging for? I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Rage, hot and purifying, began to replace the fear. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the road, my tires crunching over the gravel. I drove past the turn for my apartment complex and headed toward the older, wealthier part of town. I headed toward my mother's house. The house was a 2-story colonial on a street lined with oak trees that were older than the country itself. The lights were on in the living room. I pulled into the driveway, not caring that I parked crookedly. I marched up the walkway, the same walkway where I had learned to ride a bike, the same walkway I had walked down with a prom date, the same walkway I had been told to leave by 5 years ago. I pounded on the door. It took a minute, but then the lock clicked. The door opened. My mother stood there, wrapped in a cashmere cardigan, holding a cup of tea. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, her face a mask of practiced calm. "Scarlett," she said, "it is late. Gwendolyn called the police on me." I said, my voice raw. "She told them I stole my car. She told them I had a gun. They pulled me over. Mother, they had guns pointed at my head. I was on my knees on the side of the highway. My mother took a sip of her tea. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look horrified. She looked weary. Lower your voice. Scarlett, the neighbors. To hell with the neighbors," I shouted, stepping into the foyer uninvited. Did you know? Did you know she was going to do that? My mother turned and walked into the living room, sitting down in her floral armchair. She set the tea on a coaster. "Gwendolyn is under a lot of stress right now," she said softly. "Stress?" I stood in the center of the room, feeling like a giant, clumsy intruder in this museum of a home. She tried to get me shot. That isn't stress. That is attempted murder by proxy. Why would she say the car is stolen? It is my car. My mother smoothed the fabric of her slacks. There are complexities. Scarlett, things you have been away from. Gwendolyn felt that perhaps the car was purchased with funds that were not entirely clear. I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "I bought that car with my wages from the billing center. You know that. I showed you the pay stubs years ago when I was trying to prove to you I could make it on my own." My mother looked at the fireplace, avoiding my eyes. "I do not want to be involved in this," she said. "You and your sister, you always take things too far. You must have misunderstood her intentions." "Misunderstood?" I stepped closer. "She texted me. She told me to stop digging." My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold, like polished stones. "Then perhaps you should listen." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a door closing forever. "You are my mother," I whispered, "and you do not care that I almost died tonight. I think you are being dramatic." "Scarlett," she said, picking up her tea again. "As always, please close the door on your way out." I walked out of the house. I felt hollowed out, scooped clean of any lingering hope that this family could be fixed. I got back into my car, my stolen, dangerous car, and drove home in silence. My apartment was cold when I arrived. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, then propped a chair under the handle. I was paranoid now. The safety I had felt in my own space was gone. I sat down at my small kitchen table and opened my laptop. I needed to distract myself. I needed to check my email, pay the electric bill, do something normal to prove I was still just Scarlett the billing clerk. I logged into my inbox. There was an email at the top of the list, time-stamped 6:45 p.m., while I was driving home. While Gwendolyn was probably watching the clock, the subject line read, "Notice of beneficiary status, estate of Arthur J. Bennett." I stared at the name, grandfather. He had died 6 months ago. I hadn't gone to the funeral. Gwendolyn had told me, via a curt voicemail, that family only was the preference and that my presence would cause a scene. I had grieved him in private. remembering the man who used to sneak me peppermint candies and tell me stories about the war. I assumed everything had gone to my mother and Gwendolyn. That was how it always worked. The golden child got the gold. The black sheep got the wool. I clicked the email. Dear Ms. Bennett, we represent the Hawthorne Pierce Fiduciary Group, acting as administrators for the estate of Mr. Arthur J. Bennett. This correspondence is to formally notify you that you have been named as a primary beneficiary in the last will and testament of the deceased. Please contact our office immediately to schedule a verification regarding your inheritance distribution. Sincerely, Robert Thorne, Senior Associate. I sat back in my chair, the plastic creaking under my weight. Inheritance. I looked at the timestamp again. 6:45. The police report had been filed at 2 o'clock. Gwendolyn knew. She must have known this email was coming today. She knew I was named. I looked at my phone, at the text message that was still open. Stop digging. The traffic stop wasn't about the car. It wasn't about petty spite. It was a warning shot. Gwendolyn and my mother had spent 6 months keeping this from me. And now that the lawyers were reaching out, now that they couldn't hide the paperwork anymore, they were trying to scare me off. They wanted me to be too afraid, too unstable, too criminal, to walk into that law office and claim what was mine. They wanted me to run. I looked around my small, dim apartment. I looked at the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. I felt the bruise forming on my wrist where the handcuff had pinched me. A slow, cold resolve settled in my chest. Replacing the fear, I wasn't going to run. I pulled the laptop closer. I hit reply. Mr. Thorne, I will be there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Scarlett Bennett. I hit send. Let them come with their guns. Let them come with their lies. I was done running. If they wanted a war, they had just handed me the ammunition. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Hawthorne Pierce Fiduciary Group building with a glare that felt personally hostile. It was a tower of steel and judgment located in the financial district of Lake Briar, a place where the sidewalks were pressure-washed nightly and the coffee cost nearly an hour of my wages. I stood on the sidewalk, smoothing the wrinkles out of my navy blazer. It was the only suit jacket I owned, purchased from a thrift store 3 years ago for a job interview I did not get. I had spent 20 minutes in my bathroom mirror practicing a face that said, I belong here, but looking at the revolving doors, I felt like a fraud. I checked my watch. 8:55. I walked in. The lobby smelled of expensive leather and air conditioning. I gave my name to a receptionist who looked like she had been 3D printed from a catalog of corporate perfection. She directed me to the 14th floor. The elevator ride was silent and swift, the kind that makes your ears pop. When the door slid open, I was met with a waiting room that looked more like a gallery than a law office. Abstract art hung on beige walls. A man in a charcoal suit stood by the window, reviewing a file. He turned as I stepped out. Ms. Bennett? He asked. His voice was smooth, cultured, and entirely devoid of warmth. Yes, I said, stepping forward and extending my hand. Scarlett Bennett. He took my hand briefly, his grip firm but dismissive, as if he were touching something slightly unsanitary. Robert Thorne, Senior Estate Administrator. Please, come this way. He led me into a conference room that was too large for 2 people. A long mahogany table stretched out between us. He sat at the head. I sat on the side, feeling exposed. He placed a single and thin file folder on the table but did not open it. I received your email. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was surprised. I was not aware my grandfather had included me in his estate plan. Thorne folded his hands on top of the file. Arthur Bennett had a complex portfolio. The distribution of assets is intricate. We are in the preliminary stages of executing the will. I waited. He stared at me, his eyes flicking over my thrift store blazer, my scuffed purse, my face that probably still showed the shadows of a sleepless night. I am here to verify my identity, I said, reaching for my bag. You said I needed to provide documents. Thorne held up a hand. We need to address a procedural matter first. Ms. Bennett, while you are indeed named as a beneficiary, A conflict has arisen regarding your eligibility to receive distributions directly. A conflict? I asked. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. What kind of conflict? A formal statement has been filed with our compliance department, Thorne said, his tone careful, as if he were reading from a teleprompter. This statement questions your current competency to manage significant financial assets. It alleges a history of impulsive financial decisions and potential instability that may trigger a protective clause in the trust. My stomach dropped. It felt like the floor had opened up beneath my chair. Who filed this statement? I cannot disclose that at this stage. Thorne said, however, given the nature of the allegations, specifically regarding recent erratic behavior and police involvement, we are required to pause direct access until an evaluation can be completed. Police involvement, they knew. Less than 12 hours had passed since I was kneeling on the side of the highway, and the lawyers already knew. My sister, I said, my voice hardening. Gwendolyn Bennett. She filed it. Thorne's expression did not change. He was a stone wall in a silk tie. As I said, the source is confidential, but the concern is noted in the file. The allegation suggests that you might be a danger to yourself or the estate's integrity. This is ridiculous, I said, leaning forward. My hands were shaking, so I pressed them flat against the cold mahogany. I have held a steady job for 5 years. I have a perfect credit score. The police involvement yesterday was a misunderstanding caused by a false report filed by the same person who is likely feeding you this garbage. Mr. Thorne, I am 34 years old. I am not incompetent. I want to see the will. Thorne sighed, a small, patronizing sound. He slid the thin folder toward me. This is the summary of the bequest intended for you. The full estate accounting is not available at this time. I opened the folder. It was pitifully light. There were 3 pages, a cover letter, a heavily redacted summary of a trust fund with no dollar amount listed, and a photocopy of a generic beneficiary rights pamphlet. Where is the rest of it? I asked. Where is the inventory of assets? Where is the full text of the will? Where are the trust bylaws? Those documents are stored off-site, Thorne said smoothly. Archives. It takes weeks to retrieve physical files of that age and complexity. We are digitizing. Of course, but the system is slow. You are lying, I said. I didn't mean to say it. It just slipped out. Thorne's eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon? You are stalling, I said, standing up. My grandfather died 6 months ago. You have had plenty of time to digitize files. You are giving me the runaround because my sister told you to. Ms. Bennett, Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. I would advise you to lower your tone. Aggressive behavior will only reinforce the concerns regarding your stability. If you want to contest the protective status, you may file a formal grievance. Until then, this meeting is concluded. He stood up and walked to the door. Holding it open, it was a dismissal. I was being thrown out of a room that theoretically belonged to me, by a man paid with money that should have been my family's. I grabbed the thin packet and marched out. I didn't look back. I took the elevator down, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. They were gaslighting me. They were taking reality and twisting it until I looked like the crazy one. I needed air. I walked 3 blocks to a small park and sat on a damp bench. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mina. Mina Caldwell had been my best friend since the 3rd grade. She was the only person who had stuck by me when I left the family fold. She answered on the 2nd ring. Tell me you didn't punch a lawyer, she said. I didn't punch him, I said, staring at a pigeon pecking at a cigarette butt. But I wanted to. Mina, they are blocking me. They said someone filed a statement about my competency. They know about the traffic stop. Of course they know, Mina said. Her voice was tinny through the speaker, but her outrage was palpable. Gwen probably faxed the police report to them before the ink was dry. What did they give you? Nothing, I said. A pamphlet and a summary. They claimed the real files are off-site. That is the oldest trick in the book. Mina said. She was a paralegal for a personal injury firm. She knew how the paper game was played. They are stalling to move assets or doctor the records. Scarlett, You need to document everything. Write down exactly what that suit said to you. And you need the police report from last night. Not just the ticket, the full incident report. I don't want to go back to the police station. I admitted. I feel marked. You are marked, Mina said ruthlessly. That is the point. If you don't get that report and correct the record, their version becomes the truth. You need to see exactly what Gwen told them. She was right. She was always right. I hung up and drove to the Lake Briar Police Department. Walking into the station felt like walking into a lion's den. The air was stale, smelling of floor wax and misery. I went to the records unit window. A woman with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain looked at me through the thick glass. Can I help you? I need a copy of an incident report filed yesterday. I said, my name is Scarlett Bennett. She typed on her keyboard, the clicks echoing in the quiet room. She frowned, then looked at me. ID? I slid my license under the glass. She looked at it, then back at the screen. This is an open investigation, she said. I can give you the face sheet, but the narrative is partially redacted. I will take whatever I can get. I said. She printed 5 pages, stamped them, and slid them through the slot. $10. I paid her. I took the papers to a plastic chair in the corner and sat down. My hands were shaking again. I forced them to stop. I skipped the header information and went straight to the narrative summary. Reporting party, Gwendolyn Bennett, alleges that the suspect, Scarlett Bennett, removed the vehicle from the premises without consent. RP states that suspect has a history of erratic behavior and previously stole a spare key to the vehicle from the RP's residence, implying premeditation. I stopped reading. Stole a spare key. I looked up at the fluorescent lights. That was a lie. A specific, verifiable lie. I had never stolen a key. I had the 2 original master keys that came with the car when I bought it. One was on my ring. The other was in a lockbox in my closet. If Gwendolyn claimed I stole a spare key, she was implying there was a 3rd key. I pulled out my phone and logged into the owner's portal for the car dealership where I had bought the sedan. I was meticulous about maintenance. I tracked every oil change, every tire rotation. The app had a history section. I scrolled through the service records. Oil change, June, brake inspection, March. Then I saw it. Key fob programming/cut, December 12th. 2 months ago. I stared at the date, December 12th. I was at work that day. I remembered it because we had a system outage and I had stayed until 7. I had not been to the dealership. I tapped on the details. The service location wasn't the dealership. It was listed as an authorized third-party locksmith requisition. Someone had used my VIN number to order a new key cut. They had done it 2 months ago. The traffic stop wasn't a sudden reaction to me taking the car. It was a trap that had been set 8 weeks in advance. Gwendolyn, or someone working for her, had ordered a duplicate key to establish a paper trail. They created the stolen key before the theft ever happened. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was calculated. It was cold. It was industrial-grade gaslighting. I stood up. I wasn't going home. I was going to the source. Crestmont Hills was a gated community, but the gate code hadn't changed in 10 years. It was the year my father bought his first boat. I punched it in, and the iron gates swung open, welcoming me back to the land of the 1%. I drove up the winding streets, past manicured lawns that looked like golf courses. I pulled up to Gwendolyn's house. It was a sprawling modern farmhouse, white siding, black trim, perfect landscaping. It looked like a magazine cover. It looked like a fortress. My sister's Range Rover was in the driveway. I parked my sedan behind it, blocking her in. I got out and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I rang the doorbell and held my finger on the button until I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Gwendolyn stood there. She was wearing cream-colored yoga pants and a matching cashmere sweater. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun that probably took an hour to style. She looked at me, and her eyes went wide. "Scarlett?" she said, her voice breathy. "What are you doing here?" I pushed past her into the foyer. It smelled of eucalyptus and money. "You reported my car stolen," I said, turning to face her. You told the police I was armed. You told them I was dangerous. Gwendolyn took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself. Scarlett, please, you are shouting. I am not shouting, I said, though my voice was echoing off the high ceilings. I was pulled over at gunpoint. Gwen, they had shotguns. I was on my knees on the side of the highway. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. It was a talent she had always possessed, the ability to summon moisture on command. I didn't mean for that to happen. She stammered. I panicked. Scarlett, I was just so worried. Worried? About what? That I would drive my own car to work? About the inheritance, she cried out, a tear tracking perfectly down her cheek. I heard you were named in the will. Mom said you were coming for the money. I got scared. I thought if I reported the car, you would have to come here and we could talk. I didn't know they would bring guns. It was a mistake. A mistake? I laughed. A bitter sound. You told them I stole a key. You ordered a duplicate key 2 months ago. Gwen, I saw the records. You planned this. Her face faltered. The mask of the weeping victim slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing something sharp and calculating underneath. She looked toward the kitchen, her eyes darting nervously. I don't know what you are talking about, she whispered. I followed her gaze. On the marble island in the kitchen, sitting next to a bowl of organic lemons, was a file folder. It was thick, navy blue, and stamped with gold foil. Hawthorne Pierce Fiduciary Group. It wasn't a thin pamphlet like the one I had been given. It was a binder. It was the full estate file. I walked toward it. Scarlett, don't, Gwendolyn said, moving to block me, but she was too slow. I reached the island and put my hand on the folder. I flipped it open. I saw tabs for asset liquidation, offshore holdings, and beneficiary revisions. So the files aren't off-site, I said, looking at her. They are in your kitchen. Gwendolyn's face went pale. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked terrified. Not of me, but of the situation. Scarlett, you need to leave, she said, her voice trembling. Is that a threat? No, a smooth male voice said from the hallway. It is a request. I turned. Evan Hartley, my brother-in-law, was standing in the archway that connected the living room. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis, looking like he had just stepped off a yacht. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dead. Evan, I said. Hello. Scarlett, he said, walking into the kitchen. He moved with a predatory grace, placing himself between me and Gwendolyn. He put a hand on Gwendolyn's shoulder, squeezing it gently, a gesture of comfort that looked more like ownership. Your wife tried to have me arrested. I said. Gwendolyn made a mistake in the heat of the moment. Evan said calmly. She has been under a great deal of strain. Grief affects everyone differently. She apologized. She lied to the police, I said, and she has the estate files that the lawyer told me were missing. Evan glanced at the folder on the counter, then back at me. He picked up the folder and closed it, sliding it casually to the side. These are personal documents. Scarlett, we are assisting the executor. It is all above board. You are looting the estate. I said, that is what this is. You are trying to cut me out before I can see what is in there. Evan's smile vanished. He took a step toward me. He was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered. He used his size to intimidate, looming over me just enough to trigger a fight-or-flight response. You are upset, he said, his voice dropping to a low, reasonable timbre that was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. And when you are upset, you get irrational. We all remember what happened 5 years ago. We remember the outbursts. I didn't have outbursts 5 years ago. I had an opinion, but they had rewritten that history too. I am not the aggressor here. Evan, I said, standing my ground, though every instinct screamed at me to run. You are breaking into our home, screaming at my wife, and making wild accusations. Evan said, if I were to call the police right now, how do you think that would look? Especially with your fresh record from last night. He was right, and he knew it. He held all the cards. He had the money, the status, the police report, and the narrative. If the police came now, I would be the hysterical intruder. I looked at Gwendolyn. She was staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. She looked small, trapped in her own kitchen, under the heavy hand of her husband. "You are helping him," I said to her, "or he is using you. Which is it?" "Gwen?" She didn't answer. Evan stepped closer, invading my personal space. "I think it is time for you to go. Scarlett, do not come back here. Do not harass my wife. Do not contact the law firm again until you have composed yourself. If you continue to dig, you are going to find things you do not want to see." The text message. "Stop digging." It was him. I looked at Evan. Really looked at him. I saw the arrogance, the control, the absolute certainty that he could crush me like an insect. "I am leaving," I said. I turned and walked to the door. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through mud. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool air. I walked to my car, my hands fumbling for my keys. I got in and locked the doors immediately. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked up at the house. Evan was standing in the window, watching me. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was just watching, cold and calculating. I drove down the hill, away from the manicured lawns and the perfect facades. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clearing. They weren't just greedy. They were organized. They had a timeline. They had the lawyers. They had the police. But they had made a mistake. Evan had shown his hand. He had threatened me, and Gwendolyn had left that folder on the counter. I knew now that the off-site files were a lie. I knew the key was a plant, and I knew that my sister was terrified of something, or someone. I reached for my phone and hit the speed dial for the one person I knew wouldn't be afraid of Evan Hartley. "I need a lawyer," I said to the empty car, a real one. I drove toward the city limits, leaving the safety of the suburbs behind. I was done playing defense. It was time to find someone who knew how to fight in the mud. The office of Rios Klein Legal Aid was located in a part of Lake Briar that the Homeowners Association of Crestmont Hills pretended did not exist. It was a single-story brick building sandwiched between a laundromat and a discount auto parts store. The blinds were metal and bent. The sign was fading, and the air inside smelled of stale coffee and aggressive copier toner. It was perfect. I sat in a chair that had lost its padding a decade ago, watching Dana Rios read the police report I had paid $10 for. Dana was small, sharp, and vibrated with a kinetic energy that made me think of a coiled spring. She wore a dark blazer over a t-shirt, and her hair was chopped into a severe, practical bob. She didn't look like the polished sharks at Hawthorne Pierce. She looked like a barracuda that had survived the reef. She flipped the page of the report, her eyes scanning the narrative where Gwendolyn had claimed I stole a key. She let out a short, derisive snort. "They are good," Dana said, tossing the report onto her cluttered desk. "I will give them that. They are very good." "Good?" I asked, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. "They nearly got me arrested. That is why they are good," Dana said. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on a stack of files. "Look at the timing. Scarlett, the police report is filed at 2. The estate email goes out at 6. The traffic stop happens at 9. They didn't just call the cops. They created a sequence of events designed to build a profile. A profile of what? Of a volatile, unstable beneficiary who is a danger to the estate," Dana said. She tapped the paper. "This isn't a legal battle yet. This is a credibility attack. They are front-loading the narrative. If you walk into probate court tomorrow, the judge doesn't see a grieving granddaughter. He sees a woman who stole a car and had a weapons caution on her file. They are burying you before the first shovel of dirt is even thrown." I felt cold. My mother's face flashed in my mind. Her rehearsed indifference. Gwendolyn's fake tears. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do we sue them for defamation?" Dana shook her head. "Too slow, and hard to prove without discovery. We need to stop the bleeding first." She swiveled to her computer and began typing furiously. "I am filing a preservation notice immediately. We are sending it to Hawthorne Pierce, to the police department, and to your sister. It puts them on legal notice that they cannot destroy, alter, or update any documents related to the estate or the traffic stop. If they shred so much as a post-it note after I serve this, it is a felony spoliation of evidence. She hit a key with a decisive clack. Next, we demand the full accounting, not the summary, the raw data, bank statements, transfer logs, communication records between the trustee and the beneficiaries. They told me the files were off-site. I said, they said it would take weeks. Dana smiled, but it was a wolfish expression. They always say that. It buys them time to sanitize the books. But we are going to make it uncomfortable for them. I am going to file an emergency motion for disclosure. I will argue that the conflict they cited, your alleged incompetency, requires immediate transparency to protect your rights. She looked at me, her dark eyes assessing. But while I fight the paper war, you need to fight the ground war. The ground war? The key, Dana said. This whole house of cards rests on the allegation that you stole a spare key and the car. You found a service record that says a duplicate was cut 2 months ago. Yes, I said. December 12th. Go to the locksmith, Dana commanded. Find out who held that key. If we can prove Gwendolyn or her husband ordered it, we prove the police report was a premeditated lie. If we pull that thread, the whole sweater unravels. I stood up. I felt a surge of adrenaline. A sharp contrast to the helplessness of the roadside stop. I will go now. I said, and Scarlett? Dana added, her voice dropping the sharp edge for a moment. Watch your back. People who plant weapons cautions on their sisters do not have a moral bottom. If you get close to something real, they will escalate. I walked out of the office and into the bright, hard sunlight. I got into my car, my battlefield, and looked up the address from the service history on my phone. J.S. Lock and Safe. It wasn't a dealership. It was an industrial shop on the south side of town, near the rail yards. I drove there with the windows down, letting the wind whip my hair, trying to stay angry. Anger was fuel. Fear was just sand in the engine. The shop was a narrow storefront with bars on the windows. Inside, the walls were covered in pegboards, displaying thousands of brass blanks. The air smelled of grinding metal and graphite. A man stood behind the counter, wearing a blue shop apron covered in filings. He was older, with thick glasses and hands that looked permanently stained gray. Can I help you? He asked. Looking up from a padlock he was rekeying. I walked to the counter and placed my phone on the glass, showing him the digital invoice. I need to ask you about a transaction from December 12th. A key cut for a silver sedan. He squinted at the screen. That was months ago. Lady, I cut 50 keys a week. The name on the invoice is Scarlett Bennett. I said, that is me. But I wasn't here. He stiffened. He looked at me, then back at the phone. If the invoice says Bennett, then a Bennett picked it up. We check ID for vehicle keys. It is state law. I pulled my driver's license out of my wallet and slapped it on the counter next to the phone. This is my ID. I was at work on December 12th. I want to see the physical receipt. I know you keep carbon copies. The locksmith hesitated. He wiped his hands on a rag, avoiding my eyes. Look, I don't want any trouble. You already have trouble, I said, leaning in. My car was reported stolen based on the key cut in this shop. The police are involved. If you don't show me the signature on that receipt, I am going to have a subpoena served on this place by the end of the day. And my lawyer is not polite. He sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. He turned and walked to a filing cabinet in the back. I waited, my heart hammering. The sound of a key grinder whirred in the back room, a high-pitched scream. He came back with a pink slip of paper. He slid it across the counter. Here. I looked down. The date was correct. The VIN was correct. The price was $150. And there, on the signature line, was my name, Scarlett Bennett. But it wasn't my signature. My signature is sharp, angular, a byproduct of signing thousands of medical billing forms. This signature was loopy, hesitant. The S was too wide. The T's were crossed with a flourish I never used. It was an imitation, but a bad one. It looked like someone had practiced it a few times but hadn't quite mastered the muscle memory. It made my skin crawl. It was a violation of my identity. staring up at me in blue ink. "Who signed this?" I asked, my voice low. The locksmith rubbed the back of his neck. "A woman. She had the registration paperwork. She had the title copy. What did she look like?" I asked. "Blonde? Expensive clothes? Did she look like she belonged in a country club?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. High maintenance. She was with a guy." "A guy?" I froze. "Evan? Tall? Dark hair? Looks like he sells insurance?" The locksmith offered. "That is him," I whispered. "Why did you let her sign my name?" I asked, tapping the paper. The locksmith looked defensive. "She said she was you. She said she had injured her hand. A car accident. She said that is why she needed the new key, because the old one was lost in the crash. Her hand was wrapped up in a scarf or something. She asked the guy to fill out the form, and she just signed the bottom. She made a joke about it being messy because of the pain." I stared at him. It was so simple. A little theater, a little prop, and a sympathetic story. "She lied to you." I said, "She isn't Scarlett Bennett. I am. And she didn't lose a key in an accident. She made this key so she could steal my car later." The locksmith looked pale. "Lady, I just cut the metal. I don't know about any family drama. I took a picture of the receipt with my phone. I captured the date, the signature, the whole thing. Keep this safe." I told him, "Do not lose it. You might be testifying to it." I walked out of the shop, my hands trembling again. Gwendolyn had stood in that dusty shop, wearing a scarf on her hand, pretending to be me. She had looked this man in the eye and lied with the same ease that she breathed, and Evan had been right there beside her, orchestrating it. I needed to call Dana. But first, I had another stop. Dana had sent me the address for Northbridge Trust Services. I had assumed, like everyone else, that Hawthorne Pierce were the executors. But Dana had explained the shell game. Hawthorne Pierce were the administrators. They handled the paperwork. Northbridge was the trustee. They held the money. The separation was supposed to be a check and balance. In my family's case, it looked more like a smokescreen. Northbridge was located in a mid-rise building near the courthouse. It was less imposing than the law firm, more bureaucratic. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The reception area was quiet. A young man with thick glasses and a nervous demeanor sat behind the desk. He looked like an intern who was afraid of making a mistake. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I am Scarlett Bennett," I said, projecting a confidence I did not feel. "I am a beneficiary of the Arthur Bennett estate. I was told to come here to pick up the beneficiary schedule." I hadn't been told that. It was a bluff. The clerk blinked. "Oh, Mr. Thorne usually handles the client facing at the law firm." "Mr. Thorne is busy," I said, "and I'm tired of waiting. I just need to see the schedule. I have my ID." I held it out. He took it, looking unsure. He typed my name into his computer. "I see the file here," he said slowly. "Bennett. But there is a flag on it. The competency flag." I guessed. "Yes, I know about the flag," I said smoothly. "That is being resolved by my attorney. Ms. Rios, she sent a preservation notice this morning. Did you receive it?" The clerk's eyes widened. "A preservation notice? I think the manager got something." I leaned over the desk slightly. "I just need to know which schedule is active. Is it the original one from September, or the revised one?" I threw the word revised out like a fishing line, hoping something would bite. The clerk looked at the screen, then lowered his voice. "Well, the system shows the revision was uploaded last week. But it is weird." "Weird how?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "Usually, revisions come through the main portal from the legal team," he said, glancing at the closed door of the manager's office. This one was a direct upload. "It came through a special channel we use for urgent internal corrections." Urgent internal corrections. "Who authorized it?" I asked. He squinted. "It is keyed to the external consultant profile. HEIR Consulting. HEIR Hartley Asset Recovery. Evan." My breath caught in my throat. Evan wasn't just influencing the estate. He had direct access to the trust's back end. He had used a consultant profile to upload a new beneficiary schedule that likely cut me out or restricted my access. bypassing the lawyers entirely. "Thank you," I said. "That is all I needed." I turned to leave. But the clerk called out softly, "Ma'am?" I stopped. "If it is a preservation case," he whispered, "you didn't hear this from me. But the previous version? The one from September? It had a different charitable routing number. They canceled a pledge." "Canceled a pledge?" "To the Lake Briar Community Health Initiative," he said. "It was a big one. It was wiped in the revision." I stared at him. Why would Evan cancel a charitable donation? He was obsessed with public image. Philanthropy was their currency. "Thank you," I repeated. Meaning it this time, I walked out of the building. My mind racing. They were changing the will. They were forging signatures. And they were deleting charitable gifts. It wasn't just about taking money from me. It was about moving money around. I needed to find something that Evan and Gwendolyn hadn't touched. Something analog. Something old. I got in my car and sat for a moment, thinking about my grandfather, Arthur Bennett. He was a man of habits. He didn't trust computers. He didn't trust banks, really. Even though he owned stocks in most of them, he trusted paper, and he trusted safe places. I remembered something from years ago. A Sunday afternoon drive. He had stopped at a self-storage facility on the edge of town to drop off some old furniture. He had made a joke about it being his bunker. I pulled up my own bank app. I had been a joint signer on one of his small checking accounts years ago. A convenience account he used for groceries when I was helping him shop. I hadn't looked at it in years. I logged in. The balance was low. Just a few $100s. I scrolled through the transaction history. Monthly auto draft. Secure keep storage. $45. It was still active. They had missed it. In the massive sweep of his millions. In the liquidation of his portfolio. They had missed a $45 charge on a forgotten checking account. I drove to Secure Keep Storage. It was a grid of orange metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence. The keypad required a code. I tried his birthday. Red light. I tried his anniversary. Red light. I closed my eyes and thought about him. What was the number he never forgot? The date he came back from the war. August 14th, 1945. I punched in 081445. The gate buzzed and slid open. I drove through the rows until I found Unit 204. I didn't have a key to the padlock, but I had a tire iron in my trunk and a lot of pent-up rage. It took me 10 minutes of sweating and prying, but the rusted hasp finally gave way with a screech of tortured metal. I rolled the door up. The air that rolled out smelled of old paper, cedar, and dust. It was dark inside. I used my phone's flashlight to sweep the space. It was full of boxes, labeled in his erratic, blocky handwriting, tax returns 1990 to 1999, photo albums, letters. I stepped inside, the concrete cool under my shoes. I wasn't looking for taxes. I was looking for him. In the back corner, sitting on top of an old drafting table, was a wooden crate. It wasn't taped shut. I walked over and lifted the lid. Inside were journals, dozens of them, and on top, a thick manila envelope, written on the front, in sharp black marker, were the words, "Scarlet. If things get ugly." I felt a sob catch in my chest. He knew. He had known even then. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy. I tore the seal. Inside was a smaller notebook and a sheaf of papers. I opened the notebook first. The handwriting was shaky. It must have been written near the end. January 14th. The entry read, "Gwendolyn was here today. She brought Evan. They asked about the trust structure again. Evan is too interested in the charitable remainder. I do not like the way he looks at the accounts. He looks at them like a butcher looks at a carcass." I turned the page. February 3rd. I feel the pressure. They think I am senile. They think I do not hear the whispers in the hallway. They are planning something. I have set up the distribution to be layered. No one gets lump sums. It is the only way to protect them from themselves, especially Scarlett. They will try to cut her out. I have to ensure the third-party oversight is ironclad. I read the words again. They will try to cut her out. He had predicted it. He had built the structure specifically to stop them. That's why they were panicking. That's why they needed to prove I was incompetent. If I was competent, the independent oversight kicked in. If I was crazy, they could petition to take control of my share for my own good. I pulled out the sheaf of papers from the envelope. It was a copy of the charitable pledge the clerk had mentioned. Lake Briar Community Health Initiative. Pledge amount, $2 million. $2 million. And stapled to it was a letter from the charity, thanking him for the anonymous ongoing support via the Hartley Donor Advised Fund. I froze. The Hartley Donor Advised Fund. Evan Hartley didn't just cancel the pledge. He controlled the fund that the pledge was flowing through. I realized then that this wasn't just about my inheritance. This wasn't just about greed. My grandfather had been funneling money to charity through Evan's fund. If Evan had canceled the pledge after grandfather died, where was the money going? It was staying in the fund. Evan's fund. And if I claimed my inheritance, if I demanded a full accounting of the estate, I would see the transfers. I would see the $2 million that was supposed to go to a clinic sitting in Evan Hartley's pocket, the traffic stop, the guns, the stolen car report. It wasn't just to scare me out of my share, it was to destroy my credibility so completely that no one would believe me when I pointed out the embezzlement. They needed me discredited because I was the only witness who wasn't on the payroll. I looked around the dusty storage unit, holding the evidence of a felony in my hands. I wasn't just a victim of a family feud anymore. I was a witness to a crime. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, my heart racing. It was a text from Dana. "Don't go home. I just got a call from the court clerk. They are filing for an emergency guardianship order tomorrow morning. They are going to try to have you committed." I looked at the envelope. If things get ugly. Things had just gotten ugly. I put the notebook and the papers into my purse. I grabbed the box of journals. I wasn't going home. I was going to war. I pulled the rolling door down and locked it as best I could. I got back into my car. The sun was setting now, casting long, bloody shadows across the industrial park. I dialed Dana. "I have it," I said as soon as she picked up. "Have what?" "The motive," I said, starting the engine. "I found grandfather's papers. Evan isn't just stealing my share. He is stealing the charitable trust. He has been laundering money through a donor-advised fund. That is why they need to silence me." There was a silence on the line. Then Dana's voice came back, low and dangerous. "Bring it to me. Right now. Do not stop. Do not pass go. If they get that guardianship order, anything you find becomes the ravings of a mentally ill woman. We have to file first. I am on my way." I said. I pulled out of the lot, checking my rearview mirror. A black SUV was idling at the corner. It had tinted windows. I didn't know if it was them. I didn't know if I was being paranoid, but I wasn't taking chances. I slammed on the gas, cutting through the red light and merging onto the highway. The SUV didn't follow. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I had the truth in my purse. Now I just had to survive long enough to tell it. The fluorescent lights in Dana Rios's office seemed to buzz louder that afternoon, a harsh accompaniment to the rustle of paper. Dana sat hunched over her desk, her reading glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose, dissecting the stack of documents that had finally arrived from Hawthorne Pierce. It was not the full accounting we had demanded, but it was a start, a partial release of the beneficiary schedules and the notary logs from the day my grandfather signed the codicil. I sat opposite her, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching her face. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the turning of pages and the occasional scratch of her pen. Then, she stopped. She held a page up to the light, squinting. "Scarlett, come here," she said, her voice tight. I walked around the desk. She was holding a document titled Schedule B, Revised Asset Allocation. It listed the distribution percentages for the grandchildren. "Look at the paper," Dana said. I looked. It looked like paper, white, rectangular, covered in legalese. "Touch it," she commanded. I reached out and rubbed the edge of the sheet between my thumb and forefinger. It felt smooth, standard. "Now touch this one," she said, sliding the cover page toward me. I touched the cover page. It had a subtle texture, a slight tooth to the grain. It felt heavier. The cover page and the first 3 pages are printed on 24-pound cotton bond. Dana said, "That is the standard stationery for a firm like Hawthorne Pierce. They buy it by the pallet. But this page? The one that outlines the revision cutting your percentage and redirecting funds to the discretionary trust?" She flicked the page I was holding. "This is 20-pound copy paper, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $6 a ream." I stared at the white sheet. It was such a small thing, a difference in weight that I never would have noticed. "And look at the initials," Dana continued, pointing to the bottom right corner. She pulled out a magnifying glass from her drawer, a literal magnifying glass, scratched and heavy, and held it over the ink. "Your grandfather had a tremor in his right hand." She said, "We see it in the signatures on the original will from 5 years ago. The loops are shaky, but here, on this cheap paper?" I leaned in. The initials AJB were crisp. The lines were confident, fluid. "That is the hand of a younger man," Dana said softly, "or a woman. And look at the notary stamp." She moved the glass to the embossed seal next to the signature. "The date is correct," she said, "but the pressure is uneven. See how the left side is faint, but the right side is deep? That happens when you are using a stamp on a surface that isn't quite flat, or when you are rushing, but the real tell is the ink. The other pages have a blue-black ink that Hawthorne Pierce uses. This stamp? It is pure black. Different ink pad." She sat back, a grim smile playing on her lips. "They swapped the page. Scarlet, they took the original schedule, removed the page that gave you your fair share, and inserted this forgery. They didn't even bother to match the paper stock because they didn't think anyone would physically inspect the file. They thought we would just look at the digital scans." I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. It was exactly something Evan Hartley would do, assuming he was smarter than everyone in the room. "They are rewriting history on cheap copier paper," I said, "and we are going to catch them." Dana said, "But we need more than bad stationery. We need to prove the coordination. Did you get the communications log from the police?" I nodded and reached into my bag. I had spent the morning at the station, navigating a labyrinth of forms and irritated clerks to get the dispatch records from the night of my traffic stop. I pulled out the stapled packet. "I read it in the car." I said, "You were right about the caution flag." I laid the log on the desk. It was a timeline of the radio traffic and computer entries associated with my license plate. 2100 hours. Officer initiates stop. 2101 hours. Plate query returns match. 2101 hours. Caution alert displayed. Stolen vehicle. Armed and dangerous. Dana ran her finger down the column to the entry that created the caution. "Here," she said. 1400 hours. That is 2 in the afternoon. Entry created by user ID DISP-MANUAL. She looked up at me. "Manual," she repeated. Most stolen vehicle reports are auto-populated from the theft report filed by the officer. If I report my car stolen, the officer types it in, and the system automatically tags the plate. But this says DISP-manual. That means someone went into the dispatch console and typed the words "armed and dangerous" by hand. "Who?" I asked. "Who has that kind of access?" "Dispatchers," Dana said, "and watch commanders, and records clerks." She tapped the user ID code again. "But look at the authorization code next to it. Auth SGT-EXT. Sergeant External?" I guessed. "Or Sergeant Extension," Dana corrected. It usually means the request came from outside the immediate dispatch room, but was authorized by a sergeant's credentials. Someone called in a favor. Scarlet. Someone told a sergeant that you were a threat, and that sergeant ordered the flag added manually to ensure the officers on the street would have their guns out. I remembered the cold metal of the handcuffs. I remembered the shotgun barrel. "They wanted me dead," I whispered, or at least terrified enough to back down. Dana nodded. "It is a classic intimidation tactic, but it is also illegal. Falsifying a police database is a felony. I have a meeting." I said, checking my watch. The clerk at the records window gave me a name. Lieutenant Miller. He works in internal affairs. She said he might listen. Go, Dana said. But be careful. Internal affairs is where cops go to investigate other cops. You are walking into a family dispute. And the blue line is thicker than blood. The meeting with Lieutenant Miller did not happen at the station. He had agreed to meet me at a diner on the edge of town, a place with vinyl booths and a smell of frying grease that permeated your clothes. He was sitting in the back, nursing a black coffee. He was a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a suit that looked like it had been worn for 3 days straight. Ms. Bennett, he said, not standing up. Lieutenant, I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. Thank you for meeting me. He looked at the dispatch log I placed on the table. He didn't touch it. I looked into the manual entry you flagged, he said, his voice low. And the login belongs to a terminal in the records division, he said, but the authorization code that traces back to a sergeant who retired 2 years ago, his credentials were never deactivated, so anyone could have used them? I asked. Not anyone, Miller said. Someone who knew the code, someone who knew the system. He took a sip of coffee, his eyes scanning the room. Ms. Bennett, let me speak hypothetically. In a town like Lake Briar, there are relationships that go back decades. There are business owners who donate to the policeman's ball. There are lawyers who help officers with their divorces pro bono. There are consultants who help the department procure surplus equipment. Consultants, I said, like Hartley Asset Recovery? Miller's eyes flickered. He didn't say yes. He didn't nod. He just took another sip of coffee. Hypothetically, he continued, if a well-connected individual called a friend in records and said his sister-in-law was having a mental breakdown, had stolen a car, and was waving a gun around, that friend might try to help. That friend might use an old login to flag the car, just to be safe, to make sure the officers approached with caution. With guns drawn, I said, I could have been shot. Miller sighed. It was reckless. It was wrong. But proving who typed that entry, on a shared terminal with a dead login, that is almost impossible. So you are saying you can't do anything, I said, frustration rising in my throat. I am saying that I have opened a file, Miller said. I am saying that the armed and dangerous flag has been scrubbed from your record. And I am saying that if I were you, I would be very careful about who I pushed. Because the people who can make those kinds of phone calls, they have friends in every building in this city. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $10 bill, tossing it on the table for his coffee. The department apologizes for the inconvenience, Ms. Bennett, he said flatly. He walked out, leaving me with the check and the confirmation that my brother-in-law owned the police department just as much as he owned the estate. I didn't have time to process the meeting with Miller because my phone buzzed with a notification from my work email. Then another, then a text from my manager. Sarah, Scarlett, please come to my office immediately. I drove straight to the medical billing center. My stomach was twisting in knots. I had missed a few hours for these meetings, but I had cleared it with Sarah. I was a good employee. I had the highest accuracy rating in the department. When I walked in, the office was quiet, too quiet. People looked down at their keyboards as I passed. I felt the weight of their eyes on my back. I knocked on Sarah's door. She was sitting behind her desk, looking pale. Next to her sat the regional HR director, a woman I had only met once. Close the door. Scarlett, Sarah said. She wouldn't look at me. I sat down. What is going on? We received an email this morning. The HR director said. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout of an email sent from an anonymous account. The subject line read, Urgent. Criminal investigation regarding employee Scarlett Bennett. I read the text. To whom it may concern. It has come to our attention that your employee, Scarlett Bennett, is currently the subject of an active police investigation regarding grand theft auto and potential fraud involving a family estate. Given the sensitive nature of your business handling medical financial records, you should be aware that Ms. Bennett is considered a flight risk and has demonstrated unstable behavior. Police reports are on file with the Lakebriar PD. My hands shook as I held the paper. It was Gwendolyn. It had to be. The phrasing, unstable behavior, was her signature. This is a lie, I said, looking at Sarah. My sister and I are in a legal dispute over an inheritance. She made a false police report yesterday. I was not arrested. I am not a thief. Scarlett, Sarah said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were sad. We called the police department. They confirmed there is an incident report listing you as a suspect in a vehicle theft. But I own the car, I shouted, standing up. Sit down. Ms. Bennett, the HR director said sharply. I sat, my legs trembling. Given the nature of our work, she continued, we cannot have employees with active criminal flags handling patient financial data. It is a liability issue. So you are firing me? I asked, because of an anonymous email. We are placing you on administrative leave, she said, without pay, until the situation clears. If you can bring us a letter from the police stating you are fully exonerated and not a suspect, we will review your status. That could take months. I said, I have rent. I have bills. I am sorry. Sarah said, but corporate policy is strict. We need your badge and your keys. I handed them over. I felt stripped. I felt naked. I walked out of the office, past the cubicle where I had spent 5 years rebuilding my life. I carried a cardboard box with a potted succulent and a framed photo of my cat. I walked past the receptionist, who turned her chair away. Gwendolyn hadn't just attacked my credibility. She had cut off my supply line. She knew I needed money to fight her, so she took my job. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't go home. The silence of the apartment would kill me. I couldn't go to Dana's. I couldn't pay her anymore. My phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, a part of me, the small, stupid part that never grew up. Hoped she was calling to apologize. Hoped she had heard about the job and was calling to offer help. I answered. Hello? Scarlett, she said. Her voice was tight, anxious. Gwendolyn just called me. She is hysterical. Hysterical? I asked. My voice flat. Why? Did she break a nail while ruining my life? She said you went to the police. My mother said, she said you are trying to get the officers in trouble. Scarlett, you have to stop. Stop? I laughed. A broken sound. Mom, she just got me fired. She sent an email to my boss and told them I was a thief. I just walked out of my office with a box of my things. I have no income. You are making trouble again, my mother said, ignoring me. You always do this. You dig and you scratch and you make everyone miserable. Evan is a respected businessman. You cannot go around accusing him of things. You are going to ruin everyone. I am the one being ruined, I screamed, slamming my hand against the steering wheel. I am the one with no job. I am the one with a forged police record. Why do you never believe me? Because Gwendolyn is trying to protect the family legacy, my mother shouted back. And you? You are just trying to burn it down because you are jealous. You have always been jealous of her. I went silent. The words hung in the air. Toxic and final. Jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was horrified. I was disgusted. But she couldn't see that. She saw the world through a lens Gwendolyn had polished for her. To my mother, Gwendolyn was the golden success, and I was the volatile mistake. The truth didn't matter. The narrative mattered. The prettier story always won. I am going to hang up now, I said quietly. Scarlett, please, my mother said, her voice softening into a whimper. Just take the settlement. They are going to offer you a settlement. Just take it and go away. For me. I hung up. I blocked the number. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, grieving a mother who was still alive but lost to me forever. I met Mina at her apartment that night. She ordered pizza, but I couldn't eat. I told her about the job. I told her about the paper stock. I told her about my mother. Mina listened, her face hard. She was on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. They are squeezing you, she said. They want you desperate. They want you hungry. Because hungry people make bad deals. She spun the laptop around. But I found something. She said, "You said Evan's company is Hartley Asset Recovery?" "Yes. Look at this." Mina said. The screen showed a cached version of a web page for Northbridge Trust Services. It was an About Us page from 2 years ago. Northbridge Trust is proud to partner with our strategic consultants to ensure maximum yield for our beneficiaries. Listed under strategic partners was a logo, a stylized H, HEIR, Consulting, and look at who sits on the advisory board of Northbridge. Mina said, scrolling down. There, in a list of names, was Evan Hartley. "He is on the board?" I asked. "He was," Mina said. "He stepped down 6 months ago, right around the time your grandfather died. But look at his replacement, Julian Vane." "Who is Julian Vane?" I asked. Mina opened another tab. LinkedIn, Julian Vane. Previous employment, CFO, Hartley Asset Recovery. He put his own CFO on the board of the trust company. Mina said, "Evan doesn't just consult for them. Scarlett, he essentially runs the place by proxy. That is how he got the beneficiary schedule changed. He didn't need to hack the system. He just called his employee and told him to upload the file. It is a conflict of interest so big you could drive a truck through it." I said, "It is fraud." Mina corrected, "It is racketeering." The next morning, I went back to Dana's office. I felt lighter, in a strange way. I had no job, no family, no safety net. I had nothing left to lose. Dana listened to Mina's findings about the board members. She smiled, and it was the first time I had seen her look truly happy. "That is the link," she said. "We have the forgery, we have the police corruption, and now we have the insider connection at the trust." She picked up a file. "I filed the motion for a formal hearing this morning," she said, "and I served subpoenas on Northbridge and Hartley Asset Recovery. I am asking for metadata on the upload of the revised schedule. I am asking for printer logs from Evan's office to match the ink on that forged page." She looked at me, and they know it. Because 10 minutes ago, a courier dropped this off. She handed me a thick envelope. It was a settlement offer. I opened it. The number at the bottom of the first page made my breath catch. $250,000. It was enough to pay off my student loans. It was enough to buy a new car. It was enough to move to a different state and start over. It was stability. It was safety. I read the terms. Claimant agrees to release all claims against the estate of Arthur Bennett. Claimant agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all family matters. Claimant acknowledges that the police report filed on February 3rd regarding the vehicle was a result of a mutual misunderstanding and assumes partial liability for the confusion. I stared at the words, "assumes partial liability." They wanted me to admit I was crazy. They wanted me to sign a paper saying that Gwendolyn was right, that I had been confused, that the guns in my face were my fault. $250,000. I thought about my empty bank account. I thought about the eviction notice that would come in a few weeks. I thought about the peace my mother wanted. I could take it. I could disappear. No one would blame me. Dana was watching me carefully. "It is a lot of money. Scarlett, it is," I said. But it isn't my share." I said, "My share of the estate should be millions. And the charitable trust they stole? That is $2 million more." I looked at the check attached to the offer. It was signed by Hawthorne Pierce. "If they were innocent," I said slowly, "they wouldn't be offering me $250,000 to go away. They would be fighting me in court. They would be letting the competency hearing play out." Dana nodded. "Settlement offers are fear. Quantified. They are afraid." I said, "They know we are close." I picked up the pen from Dana's desk. For a second, my hand hovered over the signature line. I was so tired. I just wanted to sleep. But then I thought about my grandfather. I thought about the notebook in the storage unit. If things get ugly, he hadn't left me that note so I could take a payout and run. He had left it because he trusted me to be the one person who wouldn't sell him out. I capped the pen. "No," I said. I slid the papers back across the desk. "Tell them I reject the offer." I said, Tell them I don't want their money. I want the truth. Dana grinned. She looked like she wanted to hug me. I will draft the rejection letter, she said. And Scarlett, get ready, because now that you have refused the carrot, they are going to come at you with the stick, and this time, they won't pull their punches. I stood up. Let them come, I said. I am already down. The only place left to go is up. I walked out of the office. The sun was shining, but the wind was cold. I buttoned my blazer, the one that still smelled like the thrift store, and walked toward my car. I was unemployed. I was broke. I was estranged. But I was right, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. The fictional Redwood County Probate Court was a building designed to make you feel small. It was a cavernous structure of gray stone and dark mahogany, smelling of floor wax and centuries of quiet, devastating decisions. The air inside was cool, recycled, and heavy with the scent of old paper. I walked up the marble steps clutching my purse, my knuckles white. I was wearing my navy blazer again, freshly steam-cleaned, but I felt like a child playing dress-up in a room full of adults who spoke a language I did not understand. Dana Rios walked beside me, her heels clicking a sharp, aggressive rhythm on the stone floor. She carried a rolling briefcase that looked like it had been dragged through a war zone. It was scuffed, battered, and bulging with the evidence of my life and my grandfather's death. We entered courtroom 4. It was already occupied. On the left side of the aisle, sitting at the petitioner's table, was my sister. Gwendolyn Bennett looked like a portrait of tragic grace. She was wearing a charcoal dress that was modest but clearly tailored by hand. Her hair was pulled back in a soft, low chignon. She wore no jewelry except for a simple pearl necklace, our grandmother's pearls. The sight of them around her neck felt like a physical slap. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her posture perfect, her head bowed slightly as if in prayer or deep sorrow. Next to her sat a man who looked less like a lawyer and more like a senator. He had silver hair, a tan that suggested winters in St. Bart's, and a suit that cost more than my car. This was the lead counsel from Merritt Vale, LLP, the firm that represented the old money of Lake Briar. And behind them, in the gallery, sat Evan Hartley. He was watching the door. When our eyes met, he didn't blink, he didn't sneer. He just looked at me with a cold, flat assessment, like I was a column of numbers that refused to balance. Dana guided me to the respondent's table on the right. The wood was cold under my hands. "Sit down. Scarlett," she whispered. "Don't look at them. Look at the judge." I sat. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. I looked at the empty bench, at the great seal of the state hanging on the wall behind it. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The door behind the bench opened, and Judge Althea Vance swept in. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair cut in a sharp bob and reading glasses on a chain. She did not look like someone who suffered fools or liars. She sat down, arranged her robe, and looked over her glasses at the courtroom. "In the matter of the estate of Arthur J. Bennett," she said, her voice dry and authoritative, "we are here on an emergency motion for accounting and a counter-motion for competency review." Gwendolyn's attorney stood up. He moved with the fluid grace of a dancer. "Good morning, Your Honor. Lawrence Sterling for the petitioner. Gwendolyn Hartley. Formerly Bennett." Dana stood up. Her voice was raspy, grounded. "Dana Rios for the respondent. Scarlett Bennett." "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "you filed the competency motion. You have the floor." Sterling walked to the center of the room. He didn't use notes. He spoke in a voice that was warm, reasonable, and utterly poisonous. "Your Honor, this is a tragedy," he began, "a family tragedy. My client, Mrs. Hartley, is not here to deny her sister an inheritance. She is here to protect her." He turned to look at me, his expression softening into pity. "Ms. Scarlett Bennett has had a difficult few years. Following a painful estrangement from the family, she has lived a life of instability. We have submitted affidavits detailing a pattern of erratic behavior. But the events of the last 72 hours have brought this crisis to a head. He walked back to his table and picked up a document. 3 days ago, Ms. Bennett was detained by the Lake Briar Police Department. She was stopped in a vehicle reported stolen from her sister's home. The police report indicates she was flagged as an armed and dangerous caution. He let the words hang in the air. Armed and dangerous. Furthermore, he continued, just yesterday, Ms. Bennett was placed on administrative leave by her employer due to an active criminal investigation regarding theft. She is currently unemployed. She is facing potential criminal charges. She is, by all accounts, spiraling. Gwendolyn dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. It was a perfect performance. My client simply wishes to invoke the protective clause of the estate, Sterling said, to place Ms. Bennett's share into a managed trust where it can be used for her care and rehabilitation, rather than allowing her access to liquid assets that, given her current state, might be dangerous. He sat down. The silence in the room was heavy. It sounded reasonable. It sounded kind. Judge Vance looked at Dana. Ms. Rios? Dana stood up. She didn't walk to the center. She stayed behind the table, like a fortress. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the soft atmosphere Sterling had created. Mr. Sterling tells a beautiful story, but it is fiction. Dana picked up a stack of papers and walked to the bench. The petitioner claims my client is erratic because of a traffic stop. Let us look at that stop. She handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Exhibit A. Dana said, the vehicle registration for the silver sedan in question. It is registered to Scarlett Bennett. It has been for 5 years. She did not steal the car. She owns it. She handed over another paper. Exhibit B. A receipt from J.S. Lock and Safe, dated December 12th. The petitioner claims my client stole a spare key to facilitate this theft. This receipt shows that a duplicate key was cut 2 months ago. The invoice bears my client's name. But the signature? Dana paused. We have a sworn affidavit from the locksmith stating that the person who signed this receipt was not Scarlett Bennett, but a woman matching the description of Gwendolyn Hartley, who claimed to be Scarlett Bennett and feigned a hand injury to disguise her handwriting. Gwendolyn stiffened. I saw her back straighten. Sterling leaned over and whispered something to her. And finally, Dana said, her voice dropping an octave, the armed and dangerous flag. She slapped the dispatch log onto the table. It made a sharp crack that echoed in the high ceiling. Exhibit C, the 911 communications log. The caution flag was not auto-generated by a theft report. It was manually entered into the system at 2 o'clock in the afternoon by a user in the records division. Using an authorization code from a retired sergeant, Dana turned to look at Gwendolyn. This wasn't a concern for safety. Your Honor, this was a hit job. The petitioner manufactured a theft, forged a signature, and weaponized the police department to discredit my client exactly 24 hours before the estate distribution was set to begin. This isn't about competency. It is about credibility. They are trying to silence the only witness who knows they are looting the estate. Objection, Sterling shouted. Standing up. These are wild accusations. Ground them. Ms. Rios, Judge Vance said, her eyes narrowing. You are alleging fraud. I am alleging forgery. Your Honor, Dana said, and I am ready to prove it. I call Maria Gable to the stand. The doors opened, and a small, nervous woman walked in. She was clutching her purse. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. She was sworn in. She sat in the witness box, looking at the floor. Ms. Gable, Dana said, approaching the stand. You are a notary public in the state of California? Yes, the woman whispered. Dana placed the correction page from the estate file in front of her. Is this your stamp? Ms. Gable looked at the paper. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the judge. It looks like my stamp, she said. Did you stamp this document? Dana asked. Ms. Gable swallowed hard. I don't recall this specific document. The date is from last week. Dana produced a thick ledger. This is your official notary logbook, obtained via subpoena this morning. Can you show us the entry for this document on that date? Ms. Gable opened the book. She turned the pages with trembling fingers. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. It is not there, she said softly. Speak up, please, the judge said. It is not there. Ms. Gable said, her voice shaking. There is no entry for this document. And? Dana pressed. Ms. Gable touched the paper. The ink. I use a blue ink pad. My employer requires it. This stamp is black. So this is not your stamp? It is a copy, Ms. Gable said, tears forming in her eyes. Someone made a copy of my seal. I did not notarize this. The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. Judge Vance banged her gavel once. Sharp. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, looking at the high-priced lawyer. Do you have an explanation for why a document submitted by your client bears a counterfeit notary seal? Sterling stood up. Buttoning his jacket, he looked unperturbed, but I saw a bead of sweat on his temple. Your Honor, we would need to examine the document. It is possible there was a clerical error or a different notary was used. A different notary using Ms. Gable's name? The judge asked, her voice icy. That is not a clerical error. Counselor, that is a felony. Dana wasn't done. Your Honor, she said, the forgery is just the mechanism. We need to address the intent. Dana walked back to our table and picked up the wooden box. She took out the sealed envelope, the one I had found in the storage unit, the one addressed to me. My client found this in her grandfather's personal effects. Dana said, It is a holographic letter, written and signed by Arthur Bennett shortly before his death. We ask that it be admitted. Sterling objected immediately. Authenticity, chain of custody, hearsay. Judge Vance waved him down. It is a probate hearing. Mr. Sterling, I have wide latitude. If it is holographic, I will hear it. Proceed. Ms. Rios. Dana broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the quiet room. She unfolded the letter. She began to read. My dearest Scarlett, if you are reading this, it means my fears have come to pass. I have loved all my family, but I have not been blind to them. I have watched the hunger grow in your sister and the ambition in her husband. They view my life's work not as a legacy, but as a carcass to be stripped. I felt tears hot on my cheeks. It was him. It was his voice. I have tried to protect them from their own greed, but I know they are clever. They will try to change the will. They will try to rewrite my intent. They will likely try to say that I was not of sound mind, or that you are not fit to receive your share. Gwendolyn was staring at the table, her face pale. Therefore, Dana read, her voice ringing out. I have included a redundancy in my estate plan, a poison pill, if you will. This letter references a dormant clause in the original trust, Clause 44B, which I have activated with my private counsel. Dana looked up at the judge, then back at the letter. If any beneficiary is found to have submitted false reports, forged documents, or coerced revisions to the estate plan, their entire interest in the estate is immediately forfeited. It does not revert to the other family members. It is diverted, in its entirety, to the Lake Briar Community Health Initiative, to be held in a blind trust controlled by an independent board. The room went dead silent. Gwendolyn's head snapped up. Her poise cracked. Her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes wide with genuine, unmasked shock. She didn't know. She looked at Evan in the gallery. Evan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the letter in Dana's hand, his face draining of color. He knew about the money. He knew about the trust. But he didn't know about the forfeiture clause. He didn't know that by trying to steal my share, he had just gambled their entire fortune. I hope this letter never needs to be read. Dana finished. But if it is, know that I am proud of you. You were the only one who never asked me for a dime. Love, grandfather. Dana lowered the paper. Your Honor, she said, we have testimony of a forged signature at the locksmith. We have a counterfeit notary stamp on the beneficiary revision. The condition of Clause 44B has been met. The petitioner has attempted to defraud the estate. Gwendolyn stood up. She looked like she was going to be sick. "Evan!" she cried out, turning to the gallery. "Evan, did you know?" "Sit down." "Mrs. Hartley," Judge Vance shouted. But Evan didn't answer. He stood up abruptly. He was holding his stomach, his face slick with sweat. "Your Honor," Sterling said, standing up, "my client's husband. He appears to be ill. We request a brief recess." Judge Vance looked at Evan, then at the clock. 15 minutes. And Mr. Sterling, do not leave the building. The gavel banged. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Gwendolyn rushed to the rail. Grabbing Evan's arm, he shook her off, whispering something urgent and angry into her ear. He pulled his phone out, his thumbs flying across the screen as he shoved his way toward the door. Mina, who was sitting 2 rows behind him, stood up. She caught my eye. She pointed at Evan, then at the side exit. She mouthed the words, "Northbridge." I looked. A man in a gray suit, the representative from Northbridge Trust, was waiting by the door. Evan grabbed him by the elbow, and they practically ran into the hallway together. "They are trying to cover their tracks," I said to Dana. "They are going to delete the files." Dana was already on her phone. "Not if I can help it. I have the IT forensic team on standby." Suddenly, Dana's phone chimed, a loud, insistent ping. She looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. She grabbed my arm. "Scarlett, look." I looked at her phone. It was an email from the digital forensics firm she had hired to analyze the metadata subpoenas. Subject: Priority. Printer log analysis. Attached is the source identification for the document labeled Schedule B. Revised asset allocation. Device ID. HP. Enterprise 550. Registered owner Hartley Asset Recovery. IP address 192.168.1.104. Local network Crestmont Hills Residence. Time of print February 1st, 2345. It wasn't printed at the law firm. It wasn't printed at the trust company. It was printed at Evan's house. "They didn't just forge the stamp," Dana said, a fierce grin breaking across her face. "They printed the will in their own home office. It is the stupidest, most arrogant thing I have ever seen." The bailiff called for order. The 15 minutes were up. Evan didn't come back in. Gwendolyn sat alone at the table, looking small and terrified. Her lawyer looked like he was calculating how to fire her as a client without getting disbarred. Judge Vance returned to the bench. "The record will resume." She said, "Mr. Sterling, where is Mr. Hartley?" "He is indisposed, Your Honor," Sterling said weakly. "Miss Rios?" Dana walked to the bench. She held up her phone. "Your Honor, during the recess, we received the return on our subpoena regarding the provenance of the contested document, the correction page with the fake notary stamp." She handed a printout to the bailiff. "The metadata confirms that this document was not created by Hawthorne Pierce. It was created and printed on a device registered to Hartley Asset Recovery, located at the residence of the petitioner and her husband." Gwendolyn gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. She looked at the empty seat where Evan had been. Judge Vance took the paper. She read it. She took off her glasses. She looked at Gwendolyn, then at Sterling. "This court has heard enough," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. She turned to the court reporter. "I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order on all assets of the Arthur Bennett estate. No distributions are to be made. No accounts are to be accessed. I am appointing a special master to take possession of the Hawthorne Pierce files and the Northbridge Trust records." She looked at me. "Ms. Bennett, you have presented compelling evidence of fraud. However, I want to be very clear. The burden of proof for what happens next, criminal charges, permanent forfeiture, is high. You have shown smoke. Now you must show the fire." She turned to Gwendolyn. "Mrs. Hartley, I am referring the transcript of this hearing, along with the notary testimony and the printer logs, to the district attorney's office for review. I suggest you find criminal counsel and tell your husband that if he leaves the jurisdiction, I will issue a bench warrant for his arrest." Gwendolyn started to sob. It wasn't the pretty crying from earlier. It was ugly, gasping, terrified weeping. "Court is adjourned," Judge Vance said. The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. I sat there, frozen. The adrenaline that had been holding me up suddenly vanished, leaving me shaking. "We did it," Dana whispered, putting a hand on my shoulder. "We stopped them." I looked across the aisle. Gwendolyn was still sitting there, her face buried in her hands. Her high-priced lawyer was packing his briefcase with frantic speed, eager to get away from the blast zone. I stood up. My legs felt weak. I walked toward the aisle. Gwendolyn looked up. Her eyes were red, her mascara smeared. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the perfect, superior sister. I saw a scared little girl who had followed the wrong leader. "He told me it was legal," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "Evan, he told me it was just a technicality, to protect the family. You didn't protect the family. Gwen," I said softly, "you destroyed it." I walked past her, out of the courtroom and into the hallway. Mina was waiting for me. She hugged me, holding me tight. "Did you see him?" I asked, pulling back. "Evan? He ran," Mina said. "He took the back stairs." "But Scarlett, he wasn't going to the parking lot. Where was he going?" "He was heading toward the records office," Mina said, "and he was shouting at the Northbridge guy. Something about scrubbing the donor list. The charity." I said, "The $2 million. He knows the estate is locked down," I said, realizing the endgame. He can't touch the inheritance money now. The judge froze it. "But the donor advised fund? That is separate. That is a private corporate account. He is going to drain the charity," Dana said, joining us. "If he moves that money offshore before the special master gets the paperwork to the bank, it is gone. We have to stop him." I said, "How?" Dana asked. "We have a court order, but it will take hours to serve the bank." I looked at the exit. I thought about the text message. "Stop digging." I thought about the guns in my face. "I'm not waiting for the paper." I said, "I know where he's going." "Where?" "His office." I said, "Hartley Asset Recovery. He needs the encryption keys to authorize a transfer that big. He keeps them in a safe in his office. I saw them once at a Christmas party." "Scarlett?" "No," Dana said. "That is dangerous. Let the police handle it." "The police?" I laughed bitterly. "The police who put a gun to my head because he asked them to? No, I am going to finish this." I started running toward the stairs. "Scarlett!" Dana yelled. I didn't stop. I ran down the marble steps, bursting out into the cold afternoon air. My car, my verified, legal, mine all mine car, was waiting. I had the truth. I had the court order. But Evan Hartley had a head start, and $2 million that didn't belong to him. I keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life. I was done being the victim. I was the hunter now. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse swung shut behind me, muting the buzz of the legal frenzy inside. But they could not silence the ringing in my ears. I stood on the concrete steps, the cold wind of a gray lake briar afternoon whipping my hair across my face. I was vibrating with adrenaline, that frantic, shaky energy that comes after a near miss on the highway. We had the evidence. We had the judge. We had them on the ropes. I reached for my keys, intent on hunting down Evan Hartley. But a hand grabbed my elbow. The grip was tight, desperate, the nails digging into my coat. I spun around. It was Gwendolyn. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped on a tile floor. Her perfect chignon was unraveling, strands of blonde hair clinging to her lip gloss. Her eyes, usually so icy and composed, were wide with a terror I had never seen in her. "You do not understand," she hissed, her voice a ragged whisper. "Let go of me." "Gwen," I said, yanking my arm back. "The time for talking is over. The judge just referred you to the district attorney. Do you know what that means?" "It means prison." "You think this is just about the money?" she asked, stepping into my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and fear. "You think we just wanted a bigger house? Scarlett, You are playing with things you do not see. There are debts. Debts? I scoffed. Evan runs a private equity firm. You live in a $2 million house. That house is leveraged to the hilt, she cried out, then clamped a hand over her mouth, looking around wildly to see if anyone was listening. Her voice dropped to a terrified murmur. Evan made promises. He promised returns to people who do not file lawsuits when they are angry. They break legs. They ruin lives. If that money does not move, if the estate stays frozen— She grabbed my lapels, her hands shaking. You have to drop the competency challenge. You have to let the transfer happen. If you don't, it isn't just me who goes down. It is everything. I looked at my sister. For the first time, I saw the trap she had built for herself. She wasn't the mastermind. She was the hostage. You should have thought about that before you called the police on me, I said, my voice cold. You tried to destroy me to save yourself. I had to, she sobbed. Evan said it was the only way. He said you were the leak. He said— She stopped. She looked over my shoulder, her eyes darting to a black sedan idling at the curb. She stiffened. I can't, she whispered. I can't talk to you. She turned and ran down the steps, her heels clattering on the stone, fleeing toward the safety of her car, or perhaps away from the danger of her husband. I watched her go. The wind felt colder now. Debts. People who don't file lawsuits. I got into my car, but I didn't chase Evan. Gwendolyn's fear had paralyzed my anger. If Evan was indebted to dangerous people, confronting him alone in his office wasn't brave. It was suicidal. I drove home, or rather, to the apartment that I hoped I could still afford next month. The reality of my victory in court crashed into the reality of my bank account the next morning. I sat in the small, glass-walled office of the Human Resources Director at the Medical Billing Center. The potted plant in the corner was dying, its leaves brown and curled. It felt like a metaphor. We have reviewed your status, the director said. She didn't look me in the eye. She shuffled papers on her desk, rearranging the same 3 files. And? I asked. The police report is being expunged. My lawyer is sending over the court transcript proving the report was false. The director sighed. Scarlett, this is complicated. While we appreciate that this is a family matter, the disruption has been significant. We have received calls. Calls? From who? Clients? She said vaguely. Vendors. People expressing concern about the stability of our staff. Look, we cannot have this kind of drama attached to our billing department. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a resignation letter. Prepared for me. We are prepared to offer you 2 weeks of severance if you sign this. She said, it allows you to leave for personal reasons. It protects your reference. If we have to terminate you for cause, for the reputational damage, it will be harder for you to find work elsewhere. For cause? I asked, my voice rising. I am the victim here. The director finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired. Scarlett, take the severance, for your own peace. You are fighting a war. You can't work here while you do it. I looked at the letter. 2 weeks of pay. It was nothing. It was an insult. But I signed it. I walked out of the building with my box of personal effects for the second time. I felt stripped. I had won the battle in court. But Gwendolyn and Evan had still managed to burn my life to the ground. They still slept in their Crestmont Hills fortress. I was unemployed, digging for change in my cup holder to buy a coffee. I drove straight to Dana's office. I need to end this, I told her, slamming the box onto her visitor chair. They took my job. They are bleeding me out. Dana looked up from her computer. She looked exhausted, dark circles rimming her eyes. But she was smiling. They are bleeding you because they are terrified, she said. And they should be. Look at this. She turned her monitor toward me. It was a timeline, complex and color-coded. I have the forensic document examiner's preliminary report, Dana said, pointing to a red line on the screen. The signature on the locksmith receipt? It is a 99% probability match for Gwendolyn's handwriting. Disguised. We can prove she was there. She tapped another line. and the digital investigator just came back with the IP trace on the revised beneficiary schedule. We knew it was printed at Evan's house, but we also found the file creation metadata. It was created on a laptop registered to Hartley Asset Recovery Corporate. She leaned back. But here's the kicker. Scarlett, we subpoenaed the bank records for the Lake Briar Community Health Initiative, the charity your grandfather pledged $2 million to, the one Evan canceled. I said, he didn't just cancel it. Dana said, he redirected it. She pulled up a spreadsheet. The pledge was structured to pay out into a donor-advised fund. These funds are like charitable savings accounts. You get the tax deduction immediately, but the money sits there until you decide where to grant it. Evan was the advisor on the fund. So the money is sitting in the fund? I asked. No, Dana said grimly. It is gone. Gone? Transferred? She said, to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Horizon Consulting. For administrative services. She looked at me. He stole it. Scarlett, he used the cover of the estate chaos to drain the charitable trust. He probably thought no one would notice because the beneficiary, the clinic, didn't know the money was coming yet. Your grandfather kept it anonymous. $2 million. I whispered. That is why Gwendolyn is talking about debts, I said, remembering the conversation on the courthouse steps. He owes money. He stole from the charity to pay someone off. But it wasn't enough. Or maybe he lost that too. Dana nodded. And now he is trying to steal your share of the inheritance to plug the hole before the auditors come. Gwendolyn isn't just a greedy sister. She is the wife of an embezzler who is desperately trying to keep him out of federal prison. She is an accomplice. I said, or a pawn. Dana said, but it doesn't matter. Tomorrow is the final probate session. We are going to lay this all out. The forgery, the police report, the theft. We are going to bury them. The final hearing was held in a smaller courtroom, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. The air conditioning was broken, and the room was stiflingly hot. Evan was not there. His chair was empty. Gwendolyn sat alone, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She was wearing a simple black suit, no makeup, her hair pulled back severely. She didn't look at me. She stared at her hands, which were twisting a tissue into shreds. Judge Vance entered. She looked angry. Mr. Sterling, she barked at Gwendolyn's lawyer. Where is Mr. Hartley? My client's husband is unavailable. Your Honor, Sterling said, tugging at his collar. He has traveled for urgent business. Urgent business, the judge repeated flatly. While under investigation for fraud. Very well. Let the record show, Mr. Hartley is absent. She turned to Dana. Miss Rios, proceed. Dana stood up. She didn't use theatrics this time. She used precision. Your Honor, over the last week, we have peeled back the layers of this estate. What we found is not a dispute. It is a conspiracy. Dana began to lay out the physical evidence. She called the forensic document examiner, a dry academic man who projected images of the signatures onto a screen. As you can see, he droned, pointing a laser at the loops of the S on the locksmith receipt. The tremor is artificial. The pressure points indicate a writer using their non-dominant hand, or deliberately slowing their stroke. When compared to the known writing samples of Gwendolyn Hartley, he overlaid a sample from Gwendolyn's mortgage paperwork. The underlying geometry was identical. Next, Dana called the digital investigator. The document purporting to be the revised beneficiary schedule was created at 11:45 at night on February 1st. The witness stated, it was printed 3 minutes later on an HP Enterprise printer. The IP address resolves to the residence of Evan and Gwendolyn Hartley. Dana turned to the judge. They forged the will in their own home. Your Honor, they cut my client out of her inheritance to cover up a massive theft of charitable funds managed by Mr. Hartley. She placed the bank records on the judge's bench. $2 million, diverted to an offshore shell company. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters in the back row were typing furiously. This was the scandal of the year in Lake Briar. Judge Vance looked through the bank records. Her face was a mask of stone. Mr. Sterling, she said, do you have a defense? Sterling stood up. He looked defeated. He looked at Gwendolyn. Your Honor, my client wishes to address the court. Gwendolyn stood up. She walked to the witness stand. She didn't look like the villain anymore. She looked like a ruin. She was sworn in. Mrs. Hartley, Judge Vance said, you understand that you are under oath, and that anything you say can be used against you in a criminal proceeding? I understand. Gwendolyn whispered. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears. But they weren't the fake tears from before. These were tears of total resignation. Did you file the stolen car report? Dana asked gently. Yes, Gwendolyn said. Did you know the car was not stolen? Yes. Why did you do it? Gwendolyn took a shuddering breath. Because Evan told me to. She gripped the railing of the witness box. He told me that Scarlett was going to ruin us, she said, her voice gaining strength. He said that if she got access to the estate files, she would see the transfers. He said she would go to the police. He said the people he owed money to would come for us. Who did he owe money to? Dana asked. I don't know. Gwendolyn sobbed. He never told me names. He just said they were dangerous. He said he needed time to move the money around, to fix the accounts. He said if we could just stall Scarlett, if we could make her look incompetent, we could take control of her share and pay them back. Then he would put the money back in the charity later. He promised he would put it back. She looked at the judge. I just wanted to protect my family. She pleaded, I have children. I didn't want them to lose their home. I didn't want my husband to go to jail. So you tried to send your sister to jail instead? Dana asked. You tried to have her arrested at gunpoint? I didn't know about the guns, Gwendolyn cried. Evan called his friend in the police department. He said he would just flag her. I didn't know they would pull guns. I just wanted her to stop digging. The courtroom was silent. The confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. I sat there, watching my sister unravel. I wanted to feel triumph. I wanted to feel the surge of victory, but I just felt cold. She was a monster. Yes, but she was a monster made of fear. Evan had wound her up and set her loose on me. Judge Vance leaned forward. Mrs. Hartley, she said, you have admitted to filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, and forgery. You may have been under duress from your husband, but you were a willing participant in the destruction of your sister's reputation and legal standing. The judge looked at the papers in front of her. I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney for immediate criminal review. I am ordering the sheriff to take you into custody pending a bail hearing. Gwendolyn screamed. It was a short, sharp sound. A deputy stepped forward, pulling her hands behind her back. The click of handcuffs echoed in the room, the same sound I had heard on the side of the highway. And as for Mr. Hartley, the judge continued, her voice rising over Gwendolyn's sobs, I am issuing a bench warrant for his arrest. Federal authorities will be notified regarding the wire fraud and embezzlement. She slammed the gavel down. The estate is frozen indefinitely. The independent trustee will take over. Court is adjourned. I watched as the deputy led Gwendolyn away. She looked back at me one last time. Her face was a mask of terror and betrayal. She had tried to save her family, and in doing so, she had lost them all. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded with people, but I felt alone. Dana was talking to a reporter, her face grim. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. It was raining now, a slow gray drizzle that washed the color out of the world. I had won. The estate was safe from them. My name was cleared. Gwendolyn was in cuffs. Evan was on the run. But I had no job. My family was destroyed. My mother would never speak to me again. And the money, my grandfather's legacy, was locked in a legal freeze that could take years to resolve. Justice wasn't clean. It wasn't a movie ending with a swelling score and a sunset. It was a messy, painful amputation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't Dana. It wasn't my mother. It was a text from an unknown number. Area code 202, Washington, D.C. I opened the message. There was no text, just a single image. I clicked on it. It was a photograph of a document. I zoomed in. It was my grandfather's letter, the one I had found in the storage unit, the one Dana had read in court, But this photo was different. In the version I found, the letter ended with "Love, Grandfather." In this photo, there was another paragraph below the signature, a postscript. P.S. I know Evan is not working alone. I have seen the emails from the partner in the Capitol. If you find this, do not trust the man from Northbridge. He is the bridge between the theft and the cover-up. I stared at the screen. The man from Northbridge. I thought about the quiet representative who had slipped out of the courtroom with Evan, the one who had vanished, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. The letter in the storage unit had been sealed when I found it, or I thought it was, but someone had taken this photo before I found it. Someone had opened the letter, photographed it, and then, what, resealed it? Removed the bottom paragraph? Why? To protect the partner, to keep me focused on Evan and Gwendolyn, to let me feel like I had won, while the real architect of the scheme stayed in the shadows. The man from Northbridge wasn't just a quiet administrator, he was the partner in the Capitol. I looked at the timestamp on the message. Just now. The sender was watching me. They wanted me to know. They wanted me to know that while I had cut off the head of the snake in Lake Briar, the body was still slithering in the grass, long and venomous. I walked out of the courthouse and into the rain. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could drive away. I could take the severance pay, move to a new city, and wait for the estate to settle in 5 years. I could be safe, or I could look at the photo again. Do not trust the man from Northbridge. I looked at my rearview mirror. A gray sedan was parked 3 rows back. The engine was running. I wasn't done. I started my car. The engine purred, a sound of defiance. I had cleared my name. I had taken down my sister. But the war wasn't over. I had just finished the opening skirmish. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to find the man from Northbridge, and I was going to burn the rest of their house down, brick by brick. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dark, twisted roads of betrayal, family secrets, and the lengths a person will go to reclaim their life. I hope Scarlett's fight resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. Are you in the bustling streets of New York, the quiet hills of the countryside, or somewhere across the ocean? If you enjoyed this tale of vengeance and justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are many more secrets to uncover and scores to settle. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. What would you have done in Scarlett's shoes? Would you have taken the settlement, or would you have fought until the bitter end? Until next time, keep your friends close and your receipts closer.